All right, we want to welcome back to the African History Network show, historian Professor James Small. Hotep, brother, how you doing tonight?
Hotep, brother Michael, how are you?
Oh, I'm all right, man. Just very, very busy day, and this is my second radio broadcast today, man. So this is very busy, long day, and doing a lot of research, keeping up on what's going on in the news, so I can report about it and talk about it, with authority. So hey,
that's what you got to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I was in your online class last night, and all of them have been excellent. You do a lot of preparation, preparing for them, so we definitely appreciate that. And I told you that I could bring you on my show tonight because I know you probably want to talk about the no indictment decision in the Eric Garner, New York. And I know a lot of people, it took by surprise. We thought, at least this one, we still had some doubt, but we thought at least this one, was more solid. But hey, once again, but go ahead, brother, because you live like in that area. Go ahead and with your comments on that.
It's white folks being white folks. Malcolm used to say the Mason-Dixon line was at the Canadian border.
Right.
and he wanted to let people understand that up here Malcolm referred to what was going on up here as de facto segregation. Meaning it wasn't the law, it was just the practice. And so you have a form of racism that is actually more embedded in the Northeast. And I'm from South Carolina. I grew up in South Carolina. And so you have a racism in the Northeast, Midwest, and the West Coast that's actually more embedded than the racism that was in the Jim Crow South. Because in Jim Crow South, it was overt.
Exactly.
And it was being parlayed as a way of life. Here, it was covert, secretive, and subversive.
Yes.
And it's still the same place it was 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Now they refer to it as institutional racism. But it's not something that happened last year. That has been the culture of the Northeast. And remember, in 1712, we had to burn New York City down, black folks. Because this was the biggest slaving town in America at that time.
Right. There was a slave revolt.
And during the Civil War, you had one of the biggest riot in America was in New York City, where the Irishmen, who made up most of the police forces in America, even today, running the police forces and running the police unions, they had the biggest riot where they killed hundreds of black people and burned down black orphanages because they didn't want to fight in the Civil War in a country they had just gotten into that was built by black folks. But they said they didn't want to fight to free the black folks. These are the same people who are the policemen across America, in Chicago, and New York, and Detroit today. These are the top ranks of policemen in the country today. Okay, the children of these poor European cracker types who came to America just before and right after the Civil War. And they were the poor crackers of Europe. They were the bottom of the European trash pile. And that trash pile, because of the free labor of black people in America, became the rulers, at least of middle American enterprises, including the municipalities, the police force, the fire department, the school system, the Jews, the Italians, and the Irish. And these are the people practicing their institutional racism that has been accepted as the norm in the Northeast. So those of us in New York, we didn't expect them to do anything. The New York City Police Department have killed hundreds of blacks, and no policemen have ever been convicted, except the 3 or 4 that's been convicted by the federal government who took the case after New York refused to bring a conviction. And so racism and segregation in New York is as bad as it is in Birmingham, Alabama in 1954. If you come to New York, you know exactly where the black community is. You know exactly where the white community is, And you know where the little fuzzy ones, the little gray area where they allow some integration. But for the most part, this is one of the most segregated cities in America, New York. You
right.
know? And it's not just the geographic demographics, but the racial demographics and the racist demographics are par with the geographic segregation.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this question. If we go back a little bit, and you talked about 1712, tell us about that. That was a slave revolt in 1712, right, in New York?
Well, a very large slave revolt that saw most of what was then New York burned to the ground by the African population that was trying to free themselves and trying to get some justice for themselves. You know, and
exactly.
It's not talked about much in this country, but this is before Haiti. This is before many of the rebellions that we hear a lot about. The New York Rebellion was one of the biggest, and after that there was the South Carolina Cato Rebellion that followed by a few years. And there were the many riots over the years in New York where the black community was burnt down. The black community in New York has always been policed by white policemen, and so white policemen in a partnership with organized crime have always run black community until today. And that's why you see some of what's happening. Now, I see they're parading a lot of Negroes on TV talking about how they made it and they got college degrees and they've done well and why can't others do this? You know, those are the ones that the poor people in the streets, like the poor people who are out tonight, fought to get opportunities for. And when they got those opportunities, the first thing they did with it was to abandon the poor people that fought to give them the opportunities. So they have no credibility in our community. You know, they have no credibility.
You know, in the Miseducation of the Negro by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, he talks about that because he talks about how when you have African Americans going to white institutions in general, they're taught to hate themselves, and then they get their degrees. Many of them, not every last one of them, but many of them, they get their degrees, and then they want to separate from the masses of their community because they've been taught to see reality through the eyes of Europeans and things like this. He talked about that in 1933, the Miseducation of the Negro, also. So I think it's important for people to check that out. You know, I think it's important. I want to get people to check out this article here. A couple of years ago, I was doing some research on the history of gangs in America, and I was doing a presentation at a natural hair care expo in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and there was another brother who was part of the program. His name was Brother Muhammad. He was from Harrisburg. I forgot it. He's with the Nation of Islam. But he did a fantastic presentation dealing with the history of gangs in America, and it goes back to white gangs, Irish gangs, Italian gangs, things like this. And that caused me. I interviewed him on my show. That caused me to do research. But this is from History.com, the History Channel's website. 7 infamous gangs of New York. 7 infamous gangs of New York from January 4th, 2013. These are all white gangs. The 40 Thieves, the Dead Rabbits, the Bowery Boys, things like that. These are all white gangs, okay? And what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of these gangs were attacking African Americans, and because they were fighting over jobs and things like this, and we were organizing ourselves to protect ourselves from the white gangs.
That's right.
Yes.
And what has happened, the white gangs, those white gangs have become the police departments, the fire department, the city councilmen, the school unions, the police unions, the municipal unions. That's where the white gangs have evolved to. You understand?
Yep.
And they still operate as white gangs from those positions in these municipalities all across America, especially in New York.
Right. And you talked about the Irish in the police department. Now, you can see, and this is something that this brother pointed out to me, Brother Muhammad, and I interviewed him, I think it was, 2014, 2013, I think it was 2012 or 13, one of those. It's archived here. People can go back and look at it. It's archived. We dealt with the history of gangs in America. But one of the things he pointed out to me was that you can see the influence of the Irish even to this day in the police department, because he said basically every police funeral across the country, they play bagpipes. They play bagpipes at the funeral.
And
that's
if you go at
Irish
the top,
influence.
if you look at the top ranking the people who are the chief administrators of the police department today, even though the police departments today maybe have a significant amount of Italian, Polish, blacks, and Latinos, the people who are running it are still primarily Irish.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you'll find that those are the people that dominate the Democratic Party, particularly in the cities, the major cities of the Northeast, and especially New York, and control the state committee apparatus of the parties that divvy out the jobs in these positions that get appointed all across the cities. They control the different unions in the cities, and the people who control the unions have this enormous partnership with the organized crime. And so let me tell you a situation that used to go down in New York.
Go ahead.
A uniformed policeman in New York, until very recently, was not allowed to arrest anyone dealing drugs. Okay? The only one that could arrest someone selling drugs on the street, was the narcotics division.
Okay.
And incredibly, almost all of the New York narcotics division was Italian. Whoops, what does that mean? Now, that's crazy, but it went on until maybe only a couple of years ago.
Right.
You know? And so we watched this stuff play out in our communities. Like when the new police commissioner came in, first we get this new mayor. There were at least 3 to 4 top-ranking black police officials that could have been the commissioner. Instead, he brought the commissioner back, who started stop and frisk. Okay?
Right.
And then when he was pushed to promote a black person, when this black man had rose to the top where he was the chief administrator over the patrolmen, this commissioner promoted him up to the commissioner's office to remove him from that managerial position over uniform officers. And the brother resigned.
Now, why did he resign? Do you know?
He resigned because he said that position was ceremonial and was going to neutralize him from having any real administrative responsibility over the police rank and file.
Okay.
So he said he didn't want to have some ceremonial thing where he just showed up at press conferences, you know.
Right.
He was in a job where he was managing the day-by-day operation of the uniformed policemen across New York City. A very powerful position.
Right.
But they moved him out of it. And so even the amount of blacks who gets to be sergeants is so incredibly low, it's disrespectful here in New York. And see, the other thing that we have to be aware of that's been happening in this country for the last 30 years is the felonization of black males.
Yes.
So remember, when someone gets a felony, in most states, not in most states, in all states, he cannot vote. In many states, if you have once you get a felony, you can never vote again. In some states, you can vote after you get off of probation or parole.
Yeah,
but if you have a felony conviction, then people can legally discriminate against you. They can legally practice Jim Crow laws against you. And so you've got all these young black males who come from that who comes from the what's the word, from
demographics
that would normally go to police force, fire department, corrections office. But 90% of them have felonies.
Right.
So they end up on the unemployment line. And if you look at the felonies, most of the felonies are felonies that occurred after they came in contact with the police officer.
Exactly.
So
it wasn't
somebody
because
says,
they had something on.
We went to investigate it because we thought he committed a robbery, but he didn't get charged with committing a robbery. He got charged with resisting arrest, disturbing the peace, and assaulting an officer. Those are the 3 primary charges that are the first occasion charges for most blacks that end up with felony convictions, even if they don't serve any time. They agree a plea bargain, and they got the felony conviction. Their lives are virtually over.
Right. Give those 3 to us again. Resisting arrest. What's the other one?
Disorderly conduct, resisting an arrest, and assaulting an officer. If you just snatch your hand and it hits the policeman, that's assaulting an officer. If he smack you in the head with a stick and your blood bleed on him, you have assaulted an officer.
Right.
If you push up against him, you have assaulted an officer. And those three charges are the classical three that all young black men get.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They put you in that system and criminalize you.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this question. You talked, and I've heard about this before, you talked about how the early police force, even before you had like modern cities, things like this, going back during slavery, the early police force were the Irish. Now, is my understanding that even you see back then you had like the sheriffs. They weren't even called police. Right. Back then you had like the sheriffs, but you had the slave patrols, and these were a lot of the Irish.
Because the Irish, the paddy rollers.
The paddy rollers, okay, and it wasn't until originally the Irish were the bottom of the heap, and they weren't even considered white by the white power nations. You know, the Irish.
Right.
So tell us how did they become the slave patrollers, and how did that develop into the police force?
Because the whole, when we got out of so-called slavery, even for those blacks who were out of slavery before the Civil War in the Northeast, they were still treated like they were slaves. Mm-hmm. And so these white police, these white European, the poor European underclass was used to they were the ones hired to police black people.
Yeah,
that was their job.
Yeah. Right.
They were hired to police black people, not white folks.
Right.
And after the Civil War, some of the biggest arrests in this country was for vagrancy. If you didn't have a job, you went to jail.
Yep, that's true. And people can read, if people read Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson, he deals with those black codes that are in there that come like right after 1865 that are designed to control the former slaves and recriminalize them so that they can then put you on chain gangs and then rent you out to corporations, have you work on the railroads, have you work in the coal mines, things like this. It was the whole criminalization process. Mm-hmm.
Right. They rented you out. They arrested you, and in many cases rented you out to the same plantation that had you enslaved.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But
to bring it back to today, when we look at this place,
go ahead.
Let's New York has 5 boroughs, so 5 counties, and Staten Island, where Gardner was killed, is one of them. It is the whitest of all. It has the largest white population versus black population of any of the 5 boroughs. Mm-hmm. It is one of the largest homes for New York City policemen. Okay. Most of New York City policemen that live within the city jurisdiction live on Staten Island. The district attorney depends on those people to get elected.
Right. That's a point that's been coming up, man, because I've been I pay attention to, at night, the nights that I don't have to broadcast a show, man, I'm watching. I'm not watching a whole lot of entertainment. I'm watching news programming and I'm doing research. And that is something that legal analysts have been talking about. They said that this I don't remember the district attorney's name in this particular case, but this district attorney has to rely on the police union and the police that live in that city to get reelected, that borough to get reelected. So he's not going to go against the police officers.
No, but they've never been a case in New York where New York City or the state of New York have arrested any cops, especially white ones, for killing an unarmed black person. The only time anyone has gone to justice is when the federal government have come in and filed civil rights violation charges against them.
Right, exactly. And I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people, a lot of legal experts are saying that this is a perfect example, and the same thing with Ferguson, why when you have a police shooting or something like this, you have to have a federal prosecutor as opposed to the local county prosecutor or even a state prosecutor. You have to have a federal prosecutor come in and take this because the state and the county prosecutors are too close to this. What do you think about that?
That's a very good reason, but the bigger reason is the history. The history of policemen killing unarmed blacks is more than 1,000 over the last decade, and no convictions. And most of them have had trials, what they call, they've chosen, you can choose if you're a police officer to have a trial by jury or a trial by judge. And most of them chose to have a trial by judge. And that's usually in most cases, one white man. And there's never been a conviction. And so just the history, that the history alone is enough to bring in a special prosecutor under those circumstances. But when you look at the relationship between district attorney and policemen and the racial relationship, matter of fact, the head of the police union said today, you know, you worried about your kids in the street, but we worry about our kids, meaning us policemen. We worry about our kids because, you know, many of us, we have our mothers are policemen, our fathers are policemen, and our children are policemen. That's the other piece, where these same white families who've been in the police department for the last 100 years have monopolized this as a family business.
Right. Yep. Right. And then they run the police union also as well. So this is a source of jobs for a lot of them as well, careers, livelihood. Yeah. Exactly.
And so the police department have become a family business for many white ethnics. And many policemen who are in the police force now from the white ethnic community are in the 4th and 5th generation. And so they see this as a family business. And it's run as a family business. And it is always, in New York particularly, has been one of the most corrupt police departments in the world. It has been in full partnership with organized crime. And most of organized crime's money-making enterprises is in minority, particularly black communities.
Okay. Say that again.
Most of organized crimes, money-making enterprises in New York City are in the black community or minority communities. And the police have been part and parcel because you're talking about family relationships here. You're not just talking about some people that might know each other.
Right, exactly.
Since you're talking about the 3rd, 4th generation family members on the New York City Police Department, a part of the same working white ethnic communities that make up the organized criminal base in New York City. You know, we tend to look at the Italians and say the mafia, but the Italians aren't the only one that have an organized criminal base in New York City. They may not be the biggest ones. They're only the Johnny-come-lately. You have to look at the Jews. You have to look at the Irish.
Yes.
They ran organized crime in this city, and you can't have organized crime unless it controls the police department and city hall.
Right. Well, I know in Detroit back during Prohibition, you had the Purple Gang, and that was a bunch of white Jews, the Purple Gang, and 80% of the illegal liquor that came into the U.S. during Prohibition came from Canada through Michigan, and it was heavily controlled by the Purple Gang.
Right.
And this was a gang, and when you study the history of Detroit, you hear about them, and also
they've sent their kids to law school, and their kids are now your state representative, your city council persons, and your lawyers. Okay?
Right.
And so you got to understand this thing is a family thing. These are white ethnic families. That's why I'm trying to make the point that if you go in the New York City Police Department, most white people are 3rd, 4th, and 5th generation policemen in one family. And then these families have married into each other over the generations, and they control the police force in New York. And they have a partnership with the organized criminal element from whatever ethnic community they're from. They look out for one another.
Right,
and so here we are with no sanctuary. Since the law wasn't on our side, we didn't have a chance to build a police-based foundation or an organized crime foundation. Because when black folks went into the criminal business, the police made sure they didn't compete with the white folks in the criminal business.
Right.
You got to really understand what I'm saying now. See, because I'm going beyond just somebody getting shot in an incident on a sidewalk. I'm talking about a systemic partnership in New York between organized crime and the police department. And it's never been addressed. And you can go back and look at the Serpico case. And you remember that movie, The French Connection?
Yes.
You know, and that just was the tip of the iceberg. And remember the thing that Denzel Washington starred in? It was called something gangster.
That wasn't Ricochet.
No, the gangster, the black gangster who was selling all the heroin in Harlem.
Oh, you're talking about? I know what you're talking about. He played Frank Lucas.
Right.
You're talking about? Yeah.
Lucas
original gangster.
Lucas is right. Don't exist except that they're in partnership with the police department. You think that stopped when they put Frank Lucas in jail?
Right. American gangster. That's what it is.
American gangster. So when you understand, think of American gangster. Think of the French Connection. Think of the Serpico case. And then you'll understand that one of the most corrupt institutions in America is the New York City Police Department. And then that is very much true for almost every major city police department in America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And when you understand that you can go in almost any police department and find the white ethnic group that was the poorest element that dominates that city, and you find that that's the same white ethnic group that dominate the police department. And the one thing they don't want to do is give those jobs to black people because they're saving those jobs for their kids and grandkids. So they've made policemen a family business.
Right.
Understand me clearly now. This is across the country. They've made running police departments in America a family business.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people got to kind of chew on that and put it in context, but when you do, you have a better sense of what's going on. When one of these cops shoots somebody and nothing is said, if they say we got all these good policemen, you never hear one speak out. Why? Because they're afraid for their lives and their livelihood. Because they are part of the biggest gangster organization in America. Mm-hmm. And New York is at the top of the heap.
Right, I understand definitely. Okay, let me ask you this. We're coming up on a commercial break. You have there's a lot of talk right now, and there's some legislation also that is has been drafted and is going to be pushed through the House of Representatives and the Senate, things like this. What do you think needs to happen? Because this is not just a New York problem when we deal with unarmed African American men being shot or Go ahead.
One,
what do you think needs to happen? Mm-hmm.
First thing, the police can't be left to try the police, and the district attorney is the police. So you can't leave the police to try the police. So when there's a police-involved killing of an unarmed person, whether it's African American or white or Latino or Asian, then the federal government should have a jurisdiction that steps in and handles that.
Right.
Otherwise, you're leaving the police to police the police, and that's not going to happen for the reasons I just said, that these police departments are family businesses. They're family enterprises. Okay? And the district attorney is no more than an extension of your police department. You know?
Right.
Because in order to get the convictions that he wants, he depends on the cooperation of the police department doing the investigation that's necessary for him to get that conviction, whether the investigation is based on lies or reality. And so that's the first thing. Second thing, you have, since so many African American males and now females have been felonized over the last 30 years inappropriately, and if those cases, there need to be some sort of panel that began to review over the last 30 years the minor felony convictions of black youth across this country and begin to vacate them.
Right.
Now listen to what I just said. You said right, but I don't know whether you really heard me. There have been so many in the last 30 years. Felony convictions, minor felony convictions, most of which was wrongfully put on black youth who had no representation because in most cases they were represented by public defenders
Right.
who most of whom didn't even know what they were doing, and because they worked for the system, weren't going to do anything that was going to cost them their little jobs.
Right.
And there need to be a review that covers the last 30 years of those type of convictions, and to have those convictions vacated so that hundreds of thousands of young black men can have the felony conviction that was wrongfully put on them removed from their records, so that they'll be able to work as municipal employees and able to get jobs as policemen and others. The third thing they need to do, there need to be a national law that demands that the history of African American people and the history of African people be included in world history and the history of the United States in an authentic manner.
Yes, I agree.
Okay?
Definitely. I was just thinking about that
from
yesterday.
K to 12.
Yep.
Right? And into the first 4-year college. The degree to which that will alter America psychologically is beyond anything anyone can imagine. And if you think it's not, ask why it's being fought against so heavily.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yep.
You know?
Yep. I was just thinking about that yesterday, because what happens is when the history of African people and African Americans is not part of the school curriculum, going first grade through 12. If it's not part of that curriculum, then that helps to shape the way people, other ethnic groups, see African Americans, especially when you look at the negative images of us in the media.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that and that helps that helps to influence the way people vote. That helps to influence.
And let me give you the last piece.
Go ahead.
The last
go
piece.
ahead.
For every white person that wants to be a policeman and wants to be a school teacher and want to be in any of the service industry that affect the lives of black Americans, they should be a course, an anti-racism course that they have to take. No one ever asked white America to stop being racist. They asked black Americans to tolerate the racism.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So
right.
white
exactly.
America needs to be. White America needs to, if they're going to work in a profession that puts them in a service industry like the police, the school teachers, that's paid for by tax monies, then they must go through some sort of anti-racism training.
Yes.
Because they have a generational history of embedded cultural racism and institutional racism. So if you're going to serve in here, you need to go through almost a de-brainwashing process. And they can find some nice name to call it, but there have to be some sort of training program for racists to have to go through, so that the racist cultural perspective that has been the American-based culture is altered before you can get before and teach a child of African descent or police in a neighborhood of African peoples. Now, nobody would want to hear that and definitely wouldn't want to do that, but if short of doing that, you're not going to change very much in America.
Right.
You got people that really think they built this country. You got people who really think this is the home of the free. How could this be the home of the free when you have millions of American citizens enslaved? And people say, well, black people wasn't American citizens. Look at the Constitution of the United States. There's nothing until you get the Dred Scott decision, which is a violation of the Constitution of the United States, because the Supreme Court don't make the law. Their job is to interpret it.
Right. Exactly.
Dred Scott doesn't go anywhere near interpreting the law of the United States. It just became an excuse to perpetuate the racist behavior of the white male in the United States. So if we're going to be intelligent people, if everybody else who stepped foot on this land became citizens automatically, then certainly the Africans should have had the same thing. Because at the same time black folks was enslaved in the South, you had tens of thousands and later hundreds of thousands who was never enslaved, who was voting and owning property in the northern states and the northeastern states, and some in the South.
Right.
Now, I'm saying this because sometimes we let people put us in little bags, like all of us was enslaved at the same time, and so this behavior. No, it didn't happen like that. You're talking about a very hypocritical behavior. You got one black man in the South, you said he can't vote. Then you got black men in the North, and he votes in every election. So how are you going to say he can't be a citizen? He's exercising all the rights of a citizen. There's nothing in the Constitution that says he's not a citizen. The same thing in the Constitution that makes everyone else a citizen automatically makes every black person a citizen, which then makes the government of the United States guilty of crimes against humanity for enslaving its own citizens. But it depends on how you frame things and depends on how you do, what paradigm you form. And so if we keep letting the white people set the framing, then we'll keep being in that box trying to defend why we were slaves.
Right. Okay.
When the real criminal was those who were running the government, and slavery was in total violation of the Constitution of the United States. And so the people running the government should be the criminals that should have been placed in jail. And the reason we can't win any of these cases on reparations, because we are approaching it based on the premise they set. We're allowing them to frame the situation. We need to reframe it. I was a citizen of the United States from the beginning of the United States, from the very beginning, and yet certain criminal element running the government who were of European descent held me in bondage against all of his own laws and all international human rights protocol. And he tried to justify it by saying that he thought it was legally right, when there's nothing in his law that can show that he could have thought that. I know this sounds a little crazy to some people, but it's like me saying, people seeing the Confederate flag. The Civil War started in 1863? 61? Yeah. It ended in 1865?
Right.
So you mean slavery only lasted in America 4 years? So what flag flew over slavery? It couldn't have been the Confederate flag. That flew for 4 years. What flag flew over slavery? But yet they're having us detesting the stars and bars while admiring and adoring the stars and stripes, which was the flag of the slaveholders.
Let me tell you this, and then we're going to take a commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll get into some of the early history of Islam, and we'll call it a night. But when at the Mid-Atlantic ASCAC conference a couple weekends ago, I think it was 3 weekends ago now. All my days are running together, but it was like 3 weekends ago. I was in the hotel lobby with Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. David Imhotep. And Dr. Jeffries, I sat down about 8 p.m. and then I got up at like midnight, and Dr. Jeffries was still talking. But one of the things
that's my big brother.
Yeah, that's one of my teachers, man. You are as well, but I've known him since like 2008. He actually introduced me to you, actually. But one of the things he was talking about, he was talking about like all the people he knew throughout history, because he was preparing for the 50th, wedding anniversary to he and his wife, and he was talking about Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And he said, Khalid Muhammad said, why are you protesting against the Confederate flag? He said the Confederacy ended in 1865. And he said it's the American flag that's still kicking your ass. So why are you protesting against the Confederate flag as opposed to the American flag? But I think it's because people would rather fight a symbol than a system. So it's easy to fight.
Well, yeah, and I understand that, but see, what you got to understand, somebody has framed the argument.
That's true. I understand that.
And once you frame the argument, you can always win that discussion. So you got me fighting against the symbol of slavery, and you made it a flag that flew for 4 years when slavery lasted 200 plus years. So what was the symbol of slavery for 200 plus years minus the 4?
Right, exactly.
And that symbol is the very thing you have me pledging my allegiance to So that you've just created a psycho-spiritual confusion within my own subconscious, if you want to take it there.
Right. Right, exactly. You talked about reparations and fighting for reparations. Now, are you familiar with the U.S. House of Representatives apology for slavery and Jim Crow segregation from July 29, 2008? U.S. House of Representatives. You familiar with that?
Vaguely, I remember reading it when in the initial
Okay.
thing.
I've read it a number of times, and I sent it to Dr. Claude Anderson also. I'm gonna send that to you, brother, because see that right there, that is one of the found that to me that's one of our strong pieces of evidence. Yes, it's a confession.
Yes, because it was the government of the United States that enforced slavery. It was the government of the United States that protected the slaveholders. It was the government of the United States that made laws that allowed people to continue enslaving other people. It wasn't just the farmers, the whole institution. The people who was fighting, unfortunately, the people who brought that case was bamboozled and set up. And it's sad, there were some of our top revolutionary comrades, but they won't admit that they were set up and misused by some people who rolled up on the scene and rolled off as soon after they set them up to come up with a negative precedent on reparations that all other reparations case would be compared against. That's why you've got to change and reframe the argument. You know,
which case are you referring to?
Goodness, I know the December 12th was heavily involved. The Black United Front was heavily involved. And there was a young lady, I forgot her name, she was married to some German dude, and they were bringing the case against some insurance company.
Okay.
This was about 10 years ago, a little less.
Okay. The official apology, that apology from the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate did one in 2009. But the U.S. House of Representatives did one in 2008. They admitted to 246 years of slavery and decades of Jim Crow segregation, and they also admitted to the detrimental effect that it is still having on African Americans up until this date. They admitted everything in there. So
send me the copy of that, because they should admit it, because that's the crux of the problem. And so as long as you got me fighting a few little white men, poor crackers from the South, who were wearing some gray uniform and running under the stars and bars, trying to hold on to their mythology. And I think that was the problem in America. And I don't realize that not a single one of those plantations, cotton plantations in the South, would have had anything way to go with their business if they weren't being financed by the big banks in the North. Okay?
Right.
The banks in the North was the one that loaned the money to the enslaving plantations in the South. It was the corporations in the North that was running the textile industry, both here and in Europe, that was using that cotton. So without the Northern textile corporate structure and the Northern banking structure and the Northern Wall Street structure, there was no way you could have had a Southern enslaving process.
Right.
The owners of slavery in America are Northern banking and business interests.
Right. Okay, I'm going to email that to you. And also, very quickly, are you familiar with the Black Freedmen Indian Treaty of 1866?
I know Claude talks about a lot of this stuff.
Yes. I got that information from him, and I've done some research on it. And when you study, there's a documentary coming out early January about Black Wall Street, and I'm in that documentary. Okay. And I did some deep research on Black Wall Street. When you study Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, when you look at Tulsa was settled around 1834 by Creek Indians. Okay, and you have the Trail of Tears because of the Indian Removal Act of 1830, and you have the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans: Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. They're pushed off their land in southeastern U.S. and they go out west. All right, and you have all 5 of them. They go into Oklahoma. The Creek go into what they call Tallahassee. It later becomes known as Tulsa. All 5 of them, all 5 civilized tribes took their black slaves with them. And
they couldn't have been very civilized, could they?
Oh no. They call them civilized tribes because they adopted the way
I
of the white
understand,
man.
but I just want to make it clear that all Native Americans are not our comrades.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then also when the Civil War happened, all 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans fought on behalf of the South to keep slavery intact also. Okay, and what this did was this violated treaties that they had with the North, with the Union, that they would never take up arms against the Union. So after the Civil War ended, the Union, the North, the U.S., they took back the Indian territories and then put them on reservations. All right, but you have this Black Freedmen Indian Treaty of 1866, and what it did was it put those Native American tribes into a protected class, gave them benefits, free land, things like this. But one of the conditions was that they turned loose their black slaves, and it gave the black slaves benefits. It gave them they were supposed to get something like 160 acres of land. They were supposed to get like about $150 each, and it was going to be reparations. Now, when you study the Creek Indians in Tallahassee, they gave their black slaves between 40 and 100 acres of land. And these are going to be some of the first land owners in what later becomes known as Tulsa. These black slaves, these former black slaves, and that helps to form the foundation of what later became known as Black Wall Street, the Greenwood District. Some of those first owners were former slaves who got land from that Black Freedmen Indian Treaty of 1866. Now today, the treaty is being enforced for white Indians who, are descendants of people who had their names added to the Dawes Rolls of 1877, but it's not being enforced for us because it was supposed to be enforced for the descendants of those former slaves also. It was supposed to be enforced for the descendants of them and the black Indians who were part of that nation and the black Indian descendants. So this is what, Dr. Anderson has had a lawsuit against the federal government since 2006 to get this enforced, and they keep stalling. Is making some progress, but he a lot of people don't know about this, so he's trying to galvanize more support around this. But that is, but in the point that he's making, his argument is, how do you enforce this for one group of people specified in the treaty, but you don't enforce it for another group of people specified in the treaty?
Because the other group of people don't come together and make that happen. And they can't come together because they're kept in the situation we were talking about by the police and by the educational system and by the correctional system, so that they are totally destabilized economically, politically, and culturally. And the ones who do get through, as long as they operate as black individuals and not try to form any black collectivity, they're allowed to go live in the suburb. But you're just a Negro with a Mercedes living down the street from me. You have no sanctuary. You have no group holdings of any worth or any value that can cause anything significant to happen to and for your community. Matter of fact, you're no longer a part of the black community because you abandon it for your I, me success syndrome. And there's nothing wrong with success. I want to be successful, but let me be as successful as a part of my group so that I can help the group grow success. But that's not what's being allowed. And when you understand what the school system and the legal system and the police system and the criminal justice system have a partnership, and that partnership is to make sure that African Americans, where they are, and I'm not just talking about blacks, and I'm not talking about people of color, I'm talking about African Americans, the descendants of the formerly enslaved Africans in the United States of America. Because other people are not in that class. You come from Jamaica, you're a Jamaican. And you can up and go back to Jamaica if shit gets crazy here. If you come from Ghana, you're a Ghanaian American. You can up and go back to Ghana. So when you come to America, you don't partner with the African American. You partner with the white America because you feel he has hegemony. And I don't. And so let's be clear. I'm talking about African Americans. African Americans have to stop having people make us homogenize in order to be recognized. You see, while everybody else stayed distinct, we're the only non-distinct group. We have to homogenize with everybody else. We're part of everybody. But everybody else is distinctively themselves. And if you don't understand that concept, even the brothers who are talking about sanctuary, not sanctuary.
Without sanctuary.
No. The brother, the Moorish brothers,
sovereignty
coined the term.
Okay.
Sovereignty.
Okay. Sovereignty.
If you don't have
with nationality, all that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have spiritual and cultural sovereignty, you'll never have
Mm-hmm.
political sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Say it again. If you don't have spiritual and cultural sovereignty, you'll never have political sovereignty because no other group give you political sovereignty. You take political sovereignty. And you take political sovereignty because you have developed economic sovereignty. But you develop economic sovereignty because you have cultural sovereignty that binds you together to operate around the group interests.
Right.
And at the core, that needs to be your spirituality. And so if you don't have spiritual sovereignty and cultural sovereignty, you can't even begin to develop economic sovereignty, which is what's going to allow you to put in place your political sovereignty.
Okay.
I know that's a different way of saying it, but I just want to say it the way I know it is. Otherwise, everything else is just a dream that gets discussed on the weekends.
Right. Excellent. Okay, look, we're going to take a quick break here.